Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is self-image. So we get to look at ourselves and see how our self-image impacts and influences the way that other people respond to us. But before we get started, let's just take a minute to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, and revitalizing and invigorating. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension. And let's take another deep breath in through your nose. This time, imagine sparkling white light lighting you up, every molecule, every electron, just electrifying, energizing, and enlivening you and expanding beyond your body, connecting you with the world beyond. And now let's just gently press our palms together, softly, softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel how delicious that feels, to bring yourself present to your body right here, right now. And it's Friday, and it's been a really interesting week. Um, we get to today look at ourselves and how our self image impacts the way that we behave and consequently impacts the way that other people respond to us. And so, in a way, our self image is kind of a self fulfilling prophecy, right? So, I think we've spoken about this before, but I wanted to I wanted to talk about it because I, I what came to mind for me was an interaction that I had had with someone related to feeling a lack of belonging. And when it was really interesting because my experience of this person in that moment was that I had no way in. I had no inroads to be able to communicate through whatever it felt like a very prickly wall on the exterior. And this was it was unique in my experience of this person because generally I had an experience of them as being very warm and open and easy to communicate with. But in this moment, they were feeling really, really isolated and really deep in the experience of not being belonging and feeling other. And it was really interesting because despite my desire to connect with them through this, I wasn't able to find an inroad. And so it reaffirmed their experience of being an outsider and not belonging and not being able to connect. And it was really, really interesting because I could see so clearly the dynamic, and at that moment I was stuck in it as well. And it didn't occur to me until afterwards to say, hey, let's just take a step back. Here's what's going on for me right now, and I don't know how to reach you. But I think that our self image, our ideas and conversations about ourselves have a huge impact on the way that we are perceived by others. So, for instance, if we feel confident, if we're in alignment, then typically we don't get challenged as much about something because we're in alignment, because we're congruent, and through that congruency, other people pick that up as truth, right? If we're really congruent in saying what we're saying, then it's not something that people tend to dispute as as readily, right? So uh, conversely, when we're insecure about what we're saying, then it tends to stimulate challenge. It is an invitation, kind of for the wolves, you know. So the frightened animal is the one that's going to be attacked by the wolves, most likely. So I think this brings us back to a conversation we've had multiple times about alignment and being present to ourselves. And the other thing that we've talked a lot about is our internal conversation and how our internal conversation impacts our experience. And as our experience is impacted, we uh, we radiate that, and people respond to it in kind. So when hello, Dido, welcome. Great to be here with you. Thank you. So we're talking about self-image. And it's really interesting. I had another experience with a client that was so awesome. And it talks to this idea of self-image, which is super, super cool. So this person was has been sort of in the process of stepping into ownership of their vision for who they are and what they're doing here, like a mission and purpose in life. And we did an exercise where we had them visualize a line, literally a line. And on this side of the line was their life as they've been living it. And on the other side of the line was the life that they have envisioned for themselves. And really being present to this moment in this life, the limitations of this life, the identities of this life, and also looking at the identities and the self-image of the other life. So self-image is very much tied in with our identity, right? And who we believe ourselves to be. So on the other side of this line was somebody who was competent and confident in developing any skill that was necessary to fulfill this vision that they had. And on this side was the person who was hoping and wishing. And it was so powerful to have them visualize and then literally step over that line and step into full ownership of this vision and take it on, truly take it on. It's an act of courage, frankly, to do that and step into it. And it was awesome because there was such a shift in this person, and it was very profound. And I made sure that they made note of this day as the day that they stepped into ownership of this vision that they've had for themselves. And that ritual that ritual shifted their self-image, because then they became this person who does this thing that they wanted to be doing. And it shifted the identity and the perception of of themselves in such a way that there was a greater alignment and congruency and consequently a greater sense of confidence in expressing their desire, their dream, their vision, their communication with people that are part of this realm that they were stepping into. So it's really, really exciting. And I just, we've spoken about it so many times, but it's so important to recognize what identities we take on, and to also realize that those identities are like vestments, they're clothes, they're robes that we elect to put on and take off and define and embellish, and uh, we get to wear them with flourish, with choice. And the crux of the conversation here is really to recognize the power of choosing an identity, stepping into identities in a conscious way that serve us, and to relieve ourselves of these self images and identities that restrict us and limit us, and act as ways in which we brutalize ourselves often. So, for instance, I'm not smart, or I'm stupid, or I'm not good at this. It's okay to not be good at things. I'm not saying it isn't, but to be taking it on as an identity is another story. To be thinking I'm fat, like as an identity. Uh, if I believe that I'm fat, then I will make sure that I stay fat because that's who I am. For example, I know lots of us struggle with weight issues, so that's why I'm addressing that notion. We've had this conversation before, where we talked about I'm a survivor. So if I'm a survivor, there's a certain amount of struggle that is fundamental to the definition of survivor. And if we if we instead maybe say something like I'm a hero, or I'm a superhero, or I'm a thriver, it's a very different feeling than a survivor, right? And I spoke about this um, a, a while ago too, where I realized that I had a self-image around struggle and being kind of a warrior. And the thing about being a warrior is that you're at war, right? And there was a lot of turmoil and a lot of overcoming in my life, a lot of battle. And to free myself from that was really, really a a gift, a gift to realize I don't have to struggle. I don't have to fight all the time. Life can be joyful and easy. And I hadn't ever realized that joy was a factor. I mean, it wasn't even on my radar for the better part of my life. So in terms of self-image, I've worked with folks who believe themselves to be depressed. I'm depressed. Like who am I? I'm depressed. And if hello Vanessa, so good to have you here. Welcome, welcome. So if I'm depressed, we're talking about self-image. Thank you, Vanessa. I hope you're healthy and happy as well. And we're talking about identities and self-image. So if I speak of myself by saying I'm depressed, then I get to fulfill that. And it prohibits me, if I take that on as an identity, it prohibits me from the capability to have joy. Or at the very least, it makes it so that perhaps I don't notice when I am joyful, because my definition of myself is that I'm depressed. And we want to look at the ramifications of this self-image stuff. If I'm putting myself down all the time, then I can't allow myself to experience my successes, right? And this is something that we often venerate or value as humility, right? But humility, false humility, is not a virtue. And humility in terms of being self-deprecating, I personally don't believe is a virtue. Self-deprecating behavior is a denial of who we actually are. Like if we have certain skills, that's an observable truth. It's not ego to say, I'm good, this is something I'm good at, right? It's a recognition of, I'm good at this, I'm not so great at that. And it's not a matter of ego. It becomes ego. Vanessa says, I can relate. Yes, it's not a matter of ego to say, oh, I can help you with that. That's an area of my expertise. It's more ego driven in a way to be saying, when someone says, wow, you're really great at that, instead of just saying thank you, saying no, 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 even though you are really great at something. That's, what is that? What is that kind of behavior? What self-image is that coming from? Is it coming from not recognizing your gifts, or is it coming from, I'm not sure what that behavior would be coming from, rather than to say thank you, just to acknowledge that and appreciate the strengths that you have, just as you can recognize areas where you're not strong. The self-deprecating piece comes in when we have judgments about ourselves that we're sort of projecting through that, the the feedback that we get from the outside world. So, uh, self-image is what we're really talking about here, and how we can cultivate it. How does it develop? How does our self-image develop? A lot of our self-image develops through the feedback that we get from other people. So, for instance, growing up, I used to sing. I used to like singing. And I was told to stop singing, like that I did not sing well and I should stop singing. So the self-image idea here is that I can't sing. But the thing is that maybe I can. Maybe I can be trained into singing well. Maybe I don't have to sing well in order to sing, to express that joy for myself, to just sing for myself, for the joy of it. So, with a self-image that I can't sing, what else? What are the ramifications of that? Well, I'm sort of squashing some self-expression, and not allowing the expression of my voice in a certain way, right? That's a reflection on our capacity to communicate and express in all different ways, right? Um, so what ways have you been able to identify your own self-image and see how you might be able to modify that, and also just to really see how your self-image impacts the way that other people see you? So if you feel beautiful, you're radiating that feeling of feeling beautiful, and that that radiant energy is what people pick up on, and they are going to perceive you in that way that 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 confirms your beauty, right? Because we know that beauty comes from inside out. It's not just a physical manifestation. You know, somebody can be radiating this incredible beauty regardless of their physical appearance. So if you're radiating joy, if you have a self image where you're just present, not even so tied into this image, but if you're present to the moment, then the responses that you get and the responses that you make are going to be very, very different, right? So when someone, I'm just thinking of different scenarios. If I'm afraid, it's likely that I will be acting with people uh, from that fear, right? So if I have a self image of being a victim, then I'm going to be interacting with people from that place of victimhood, and people will tend to behave in ways that I then get to interpret as a reinforcement of my victimhood. I'm wondering if you have any experience of this, where if you're feeling kind of uh, down and at the effect of life, that more things arise. It's just like, oh my gosh, one more thing, right? And those things keep showing up. If you don't feel like you're a victim, even if those things showed up, it wouldn't register in the same way. And when the things don't register that way, then our behavior is such that people will respond differently to us. So the idea here is that our self-image is often a self-fulfilling prophecy, because we are broadcasting whatever it is that's at the core of that image. So how do we impact that? How do we change that if we do want to change that? One of the first things is by recognizing it, by recognizing, oh wow, this is part of my self-image. So Vanessa says, yes, but it's so hard. It's so hard to change these things. Well, um, I think that as we start recognizing how we're creating those things in the first place, that it might become a little easier to change them when we recognize that we're having these conversations all the time about ourselves. So, for instance, I'm just going to say, uh, let's talk about weight, because some people can be really thin and think they're fat, for instance. So some people can be really heavy and not be at the effect of it, not identify as being fat or having a negative impact on their self-esteem. And I'm using this not because I have a judgment. Our culture does have judgments about weight, and I have struggled with that in my life, and I know so many people who have. I know that as we think we're fat, for instance, or as we think we're a victim, or as we think we're inadequate, what happens is we project this and we get all kinds of feedback as a result. But how are we projecting it? How are we creating it? We're creating it with these conversations in our own minds. And as we realize that we're doing that with our conversations, we can bring ourselves more present to it. And like we believe these conversations are true. The truth is that they're not typically true. They're just one way of looking at something, and there are other ways to look at those things. So if we can reframe our conversation, if we can start generating new conversations for ourselves, then that shifts our experience. So Vanessa, I wonder if you've had, okay, so um, Vanessa says, I did think I was ugly and fat, and now I'm bigger after my last child. And so you can potentially, so Vanessa says, I'm in this battle right now. Let me just also read what Dido said. Dido says, that feels so true. In terms of a fearful self-image, I used to think if I worried about something, it would actually help me control the situation. And if I suffered enough somehow, that would be some kind of sacrifice offering that would make the situation better. Wow, Dido, you're not alone in that. I think that a lot of people feel like the fearful self-image, if I suffer, if I'm, that'll redeem me somehow. And Vanessa, with your situation, um, what we get to do is to start putting on our attention on what works. So look for, rather than focusing on the things that you're focusing on to determine that you're ugly or fat or that you were, look at the things that you appreciate about yourself. Look at, maybe you have gorgeous eyes. Maybe you have just the most winning, wonderful smile. Maybe you can start loving those parts of yourself. And what I'm aware of is that as we begin to love ourselves more, we are more loving in our behaviors toward ourselves. And as far as judgments of ugliness, we can always be looking at things to pick ourselves apart about. And conversely, we can always be looking at things that we can strengthen ourselves about and say, wow, I really love this about myself. And as we put our attention on that, the love for ourselves can grow and we can cultivate it. And then we can typically then take better care of ourselves and find peace in ourselves, um, around taking action even to address those things that we're not as happy about, but we can do it from a place of love and appreciation. And Dido, in relation to this fearful self-image, um, it's an interesting dynamic, because you talk about sacrifice. If you suffered enough that it might redeem you and make the situation better, but suffering perpetuates suffering. And so the movement from the fearful self-image is a movement into finding that central core and connection and integration, and moving into a deeper space of confidence. And then that deeper space of confidence or self assurance, maybe is even a better way to say it, will then manifest different circumstances. But when we're fearful, we draw things to be fearful about. It's like I already said, it's like an animal can smell fear. So maybe you've had an experience with an animal. If you were afraid, for instance, of a dog, that dog is much more likely to attack. And so when we are able to cultivate a place of calm and self assurance and alignment and balance, then we're likely to draw very different circumstances to ourselves. And so I don't particularly believe that suffering in any circumstance necessarily by its own merit creates any particular benefit. Um, yeah, I know that sometimes we get to suffer through things, but the suffering part is the internal dynamic that we generate, the internal conversation about a circumstance. The suffering is often born from resistance rather than experiencing what it is we're going through. And like the suffering part is the commentary, I think, is really what we're talking about. So the self-image, fearful self-image, is feeling small, right? And so being able to move in, like the self-image of somebody who has a fearful self-image is that they're contracted and maybe bowed down, and someone who is self-assured is more expanded and open and upright. And um, we do get to see this transformation. So we do get to look at the fears that we generate for ourselves, and to reframe those as well. It's like, look at, what am I afraid of? Well, we can bring ourselves back to this particular moment right here, right now. It's because the fear is really projecting negative imagining forward. So when we experience fear, the thing to do is to bring ourselves back. And we said this the other day, bring ourselves back to this present moment and notice, right here, right now, in this moment, I'm fine. In this moment, I'm okay. In this moment, I can make it to the next moment. Like each moment I'm in, now it's this moment. Now it's this moment. Now it's this moment. And there have been times, certainly in my life, where I too had been really overcome with anxiety and fear, and did not know how to manage it, did not know what was going to happen next. We never really do, but I was terrified. And I was able periodically, as I remembered, to bring myself back into this moment and this moment and this moment. And that was my salvation, to be able to be present to the moment that is here, right now. And so Vanessa for you, recognize the conversation you have about yourself. And when you see yourself in the mirror, instead of looking at you and judging you and telling yourself these terrible things about yourself, look at you as as someone from the outside, and like step outside yourself and look at you and look for the beauty in you from a place of a compassionate and loving heart, and see the beauty in you, even if it's a dimple in your cheek, whatever it is, however it is for you to start. And in this moment, absolutely, Dido, in this moment, I'm okay. In this moment. Because really, 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 guys, the only thing we have is this moment. That's all there really is. All the rest of it is made up. The past is a story that we made up about circumstances that we may or may not remember with great accuracy. And the future is something we project forward. So all there really is this moment. So Roz says, and welcome, Roz. So glad to have you here. And Nina, I didn't acknowledge you. I'm so glad to have you here too, and everybody else who's here joining in this conversation. Roz says, I had to train myself that nothing bad was going to happen to me at this moment. I would use phrases like, say, I am safe or I am whole. And that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference in this moment. In this moment, I'm here. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm safe. And I'm whole. Right here, right now, I'm present. And sometimes that's what it takes to take baby steps forward. So, hello, Diane. This is great. So glad to have you here. Welcome. So, uh, we are talking today about self image and how we get to cultivate a self image that really serves our intentions more effectively, and also to recognize how our self image impacts our behavior, which impacts the way that other people respond. And so, oftentimes, our self image becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in that it elicits behavior from others that reinforce that image. So we get to be a little bit more proactive in how we adjust our communication with ourselves. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. So that is it for today. And on a Friday, it's a great opportunity for us to look at the week, take stock, and really make some positive choices to take into the weekend and celebrate yourself and celebrate your awareness, and create a place to live from that serves you better, and that is a reflection of your balanced and loving heart. And Nina says, I agree. Live the moment, forget the past, and bless the future. Yeah, well, so I don't know that we can forget the past necessarily, but let's not live there, right? And let's be alert to the things that we are allowing ourselves to believe about the past. And Donna says, thank you. I really needed to hear these words today. And Diane says, I learn a lot from these shows. Guys, I have to tell you, you just made my day. Thank you so much. It matters to me that so much that to hear you say that it makes a difference, because um, I just really does my heart good. I'm so grateful for that feedback from you, and I'm so delighted to hear that these conversations are a support for you. That's wonderful. So thank you. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I'm here on Enlightened World Network Facebook page every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And please check out the awesome programming on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. There are tons of light workers doing amazing things there, wonderful meditations, etc. And I really look forward to seeing you next week. So have a wonderful weekend and be good to you and lots of love. Until next time.